And here with us, that is a superstar duo. Also, the political panel for the day, Nancy Cordes, following the Democrats.
Who is he talking about?
You're Batman and I'm Robin.
I see.
And Major Garrett, following the Republican race to the White House, perhaps via Trump Tower. Yesterday,
maybe, maybe not.
We'll see. It was, as you were saying just a minute ago, perhaps for the newly initiated, that was something to behold. For those of you who've been following the Trump train now for quite some time, more of the same. But boy, there seemed to be an acute rancor.
Yeah, there was a lot more snarl to Trump yesterday. And for the new initiates, that is shocking. But for those of us who've been around Donald Trump for the better part of 9 months, as I have, it was of a piece of his gamesmanship with reporters. There is a certain aspect of Trump that likes the sport, the give and take of questions and answers, and there's a dimension of blood sport to it, where Trump does intend to intimidate you if you can be intimidated. One thing you learn about Trump when you cover him is don't get intimidated, and he respects that. And if you carry forward, he'll answer your question. And it's worth pointing out, he has more press conferences than Hillary Clinton, point one. Point two, the very press conference yesterday validated all of the scrutiny he was so menacingly scorning. So in a certain way, that's the way the system works. You have a snarling politician who doesn't want to answer questions. Guess what? You keep asking them, and eventually he answers them.
But that seemed to be part of the point. If he was a snarling politician, one thinks that maybe would have gone differently. There's a sense, even now, that there's a part of Donald Trump that may not understand that he's running for president of the United States.
Right. He's still not the reality TV star and bon vivant of New York and real estate developer who craves and consumes Page Six and tabloid recitations of his fascinating little life.
And loves the red light.
And loves the red light. All of that is a world that Donald Trump has known most of his professional career. But it is a different, larger world with many more angles, dimensions, and levels of scrutiny that he's simply not accustomed to.
And this is ironic because this is a guy who courted the press actively in the early years of his rise in New York City and would call some of these gossip columnists every day, had them in his speed dial back in the day.
Or have his PR folks like John Miller do it for him.
John Miller or John Barron, whoever was on duty that day.
Right.
So he had very, very strong relationships with the reporters who he now claims.
And one thing that Trump doesn't like is, in that context, that's all transactional, purely transactional. Nuggets here, nuggets there.
You
have your minions work the angle, so if you get a little negative, you put a little positive around there. It's a matrix he was very familiar with. Political coverage is very different. It comes at you from all sorts of different angles, and there are lots of reporters who don't take what you say at face value, and they demand answers. And this news organization, I give great credit to the Washington Post. They were incredibly dogged on this, on the veterans thing. And look, the money is real. The organizations are real. We verified it. It's all true. There's no scandal here. It was just a simple process of a public official touting something he had done to gain a basking glow for himself. And people saying, well, what'd you do? And him resenting the fact that someone didn't take it at face value. Well, guess what? That's what happens.
And, Nancy, you make the point that, certainly Donald Trump made the point. At least I sat at the lectern. At least I took the questions.
Right.
What has, for instance, Hillary Clinton done? And she took a poke at him yesterday that he had to be shamed into making those donations. But what to make of, on the other side of things, somebody who hasn't had a press conference of any kind in months?
I mean, at least he took the tough questions. He knew he was going to get them, and he took them. Same goes for another press conference that you were at last week in North Dakota. He knows he's going to get a lot of tough questions, and he does these press conferences anyway. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, hasn't done one, as Donald Trump helpfully pointed out on Twitter last night, for something like 150 days. She hasn't done a press conference since Iowa. She had a big setback last week. This big report came out from the State Department Inspector General about her use of email. A lot of us reporters who cover her on the campaign trail wanted to ask her about that, tried to get a question to her, shouted to her on the rope line, and there was no response. And she didn't do a press conference then, now says she's sure that she will fit one in the future. So that's the ultimate irony here, is that she says that she respects the press, that she respects the hard work that the press needs to do, and she does do do some interviews, but Donald Trump is probably more accessible
and
to the reporters who cover him.
Cable news control room numbers in her speed dial now.
Yeah.
She's calling into shows now in ways she never ever did before, and that's that's an evolution. It seems to me.
It is
a little bit.
Her campaign realized that they were kind of behind the 8 ball during the early primary season, when she sort of would stick to a message of the day out on the campaign trail, not really take questions. And then Bernie Sanders, who was a little bit more free form, would kind of jump in and respond to whatever it was she had to say and talk to us. So he kind of looked like he was current, he was of the moment, and she looked like she was sort of stuck on yesterday's news. And they know they need to get in the news cycle because Donald Trump is as immersed in the news cycle as you can get. He's responding real time on Twitter all the time.
And we've seen it. We saw her campaign over the Memorial Day weekend kind of tweak the messaging about the email scandal. Acknowledge now that it was a mistake, not so much the fact that there was no new news here. Interestingly, Donald Trump was somewhat reserved. When he's been asked about this specific topic, he takes a breath, says it's very bad, but he doesn't actually seem to take a big swing. He doesn't want to lunge. Is there a sense that that's doing enough damage without him having to push it?
He's not lunging as much as he had been a couple, 3 months ago, where he said she can't run, she's going to be indicted for sure, you know, this is a criminal thing. Now he's much more cautious about that because the larger story around Hillary is less flattering. There's less to speculate about. The IG report is in no way helpful to Hillary Clinton's overall explanations. If you lay that Inspector General's report against the transcript of her first press conference at this, where you asked her several questions at the United Nations many months ago, a press conference that came after numerous days when you had to imagine Clinton and all of her legal advisors were scrutinizing her likely answers very carefully. You lay those two together, there's almost no crossover whatsoever. Very damning.
And a couple of things. I mean, first of all, rule one of politics is when your opponent is doing damage to themselves, get out of the way. You know, let that, you know, don't muddle it up with your own comments. Just let that happen. And number two, he knows that this is going to be a potent issue in November. So why, you know, sort of pull out your entire bag of tricks now? Why not save it until September or October instead of letting
considering
the electorate
where he's
get
gone though lately? It is a measure of restraint that we have not seen from him. Interestingly, though, you know, here we are maybe at a point in this campaign where it's optics. We have a presumptive GOP nominee. We have a likely Democratic nominee, but albeit one who seems to be limping to the finish, who's now changing her schedule to get back to California, even though in theory the delegates are not a concern. And as we saw in the Quinnipiac poll, a lot of numbers come out. Maybe Bernie Sanders takes solace in the fact that he beats Trump theoretically better than Hillary Clinton does at this point in time. But
you know what? You know who else can take solace is John Kasich, who also was doing better against Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump is. And where is John Kasich today? He's out of the race. That's not the measurement at the end of the day that matters, no matter how much Bernie Sanders tries to insist that it is.
But one measure that maybe does, Americans want to have Donald Trump in their backyard at the barbecue.
Yeah.
And it seems that in an ad hominem election cycle where you have two of the three remaining candidates who are flexible if in the moment, how much of the optics would a loss in California, would this idea be that she's reactive and not proactive? What does that do to her right now?
I think it hurts right now. How much it hurts in the future is unclear. A few weeks from now, after, you know, she and Donald Trump have clashed on 5 more issues, do people really remember how she did in California? I'm not sure. You know, Barack Obama lost California by about 10 points back in 2008, and that didn't hurt him very much. People didn't say, oh, he's limping now into the nomination. He had the delegates, you know, he won some, he lost some, and he ended up becoming the nominee. Now, yes, Hillary Clinton, we assumed would be a much tougher competitor to him than we would have said at the outset that Bernie Sanders was going to be to Hillary Clinton. So in that sense, you know, when people thought she was going to clean up and it turns out that she's had a lot of competition, that's not great news.
But we still don't know where this ends with Bernie Sanders, which is to say the anger wasn't just reserved for Donald Trump yesterday. Yesterday, Bernie Sanders also really stepped up his rhetoric in saying it's not going to be over on June 7th. Do not call this on June 7th. That thorn in Hillary Clinton's side is going to be there far beyond June 7th.
Right, you wonder how far he's going to take this, because on June 8th, I can guarantee you.
I think the city of Philadelphia has a sense of
lot,
maybe how far.
You're so right. Everyone's going to be wearing flak jackets to that convention because it could get a little rowdy. But I think on June 8th, you're going to have a lot of high-profile Democrats who have been holding their fire until now, saying, Bernie, it's time to pack it in. You don't have the pledged delegates you need. You don't have the superdelegates you need. You are hurting the Democratic Party, and you got to go. Now, those kinds of entreaties haven't worked so far. So it's hard to say.
It didn't work on Monday.
Right. It's hard to say how much impact that's going to have. But if it gets to be just an overwhelming chorus, and he gets the sense, oh, wait a minute, I'm now hurting my leverage rather than helping it, he might make a different calculation. But it's hard to say.
At some point, every presidential campaign has to transition, that's in this particular scenario, from rhetoric to tactics. And the rhetoric now is uncompromising, because this is now a time for being uncompromising. Help me win California. Give me all the maximum leverage. But at some point, you have to transition. And it's the skilled politician, and not everyone is skilled enough or has the central core of ego and balance of ego and tactical smarts to make the transition. But if you make it, you can gain more for yourself in losing than you can being a sore loser. And there are tremendous aspects of the Bernie Sanders agenda that basically are in his hands. You screw this up, you lose platform fights, you lose your own sense of centrality in the Democratic conversation, and you become shunted aside because you are not dealing with this moment properly. If you do it well, you can maximize your leverage, be brought into the conversation, be a perpetual voice, and bring all of the people that you inspired into the Democratic conversation and not on the margins. That's what Bernie Sanders has to figure out in the next 2.5 weeks, it seems to me.
Keep in mind that every candidate says they're staying in until the minute that they drop out.
Yeah.
Think back to Indiana. Ted Cruz in the afternoon was going after Donald Trump harder than he ever has. And in the evening, he was dropping out of the race and saying, thank you everyone very much. It was completely, everyone was blindsided by that.
Wow.
So just because he's saying this week, it's not over, it's never over, I don't care, doesn't mean that things couldn't all change next week.
One day it's nitroglycerin, the next day it's a doily.
A man covering Donald Trump understands that acutely. Major, Nancy, superstars indeed. Thank you.
Too kind.
You're welcome, Superman.